Hi, Mark. Welcome around the workstand.
Hey, Susie, what are we talking about today?
Wow, what are we talking about today?
Well, I know what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
I don't know, it just kind of comes up now and again. And I
Hmm.
think if you've been around the cycling world, retail for a long time, it used to be bikes kind of existed off on their own with other hobbies and activities that weren't necessarily mainstream. That's not the case anymore. I
Hmm.
think it's pretty obvious that the cyclist, people that want to ride bikes, that they're the same people that like kayaks or shop at Nordstroms, or they do a lot of shopping. They're consumers just like any
Yes.
other.
Out and about doing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe we all wish there wasn't so much communication, but there is. And so today's topic is kind of, if you're not communicating with your customers, other entities are.
Yeah.
And you're competing for the attention and the resources and the money and the time, et cetera, with
Hmm.
those other seemingly unrelated activities, but they're related in the sense that it's the same consumer. And more so than ever in history, people just consume different things. So it's not that they put cycling or bike riding off in this special category. It's just one of the things a lot of them do. And that's not always, certainly there's no, like Ryan always says, let's avoid yes or no thinking or, off and on type thinking. Certainly there,
Hmm.
it's not the case, but in the broader market, it is the case. And so if you're not communicating with your customers, your key customers, at least those that make large purchases, other stores are. And we want to make sure we call that out because it's important that you
Hmm.
communicate with your customers. The people most likely to buy from you are the ones that already did.
Yeah, absolutely. And we always kind of talk about how acquiring new customers is more expensive and
Mhm.
more challenging. Um, but getting back in front of the folks that you already have a relationship with, already know how great it is to shop with you. That's always going to be kind of the path of least resistance. You'll get the most results as well.
Yeah. And I don't know why I feel like I need to be gentle with this topic. I think
Right?
everybody knows that, but I
Yeah.
don't want it to sound preachy. I don't want
No.
it to be one of those things where you have to. You don't do anything you don't want to do.
Yeah, or feel like we're necessarily always kind of pushing like in order to do that you need our help, you need our
Yeah,
services. And that's I mean, we're happy to obviously do that. We are a
obviously.
business. We actually really like the work, so
We do.
that's a big
I think
piece
we're
of
good
it.
at it. But that's a
Yeah.
good point that it's not, this isn't a do more business with Workstand thing. It really is more of a general idea. And
Hmm.
that idea is that the tools exist because if physically, I mean, think about it. If take something straightforward like a bike purchase,
Hmm.
the thought of being able to communicate with everybody that buys a bike from you two or three or four or five times a year, do that manually is an impossibly daunting task. But the tools exist to do those things, and there's certainly multiple ways to do it. But the key point is that regular outreach or regular communication is what's really important,
Hmm.
and it can't. You always talk about this. You can't just talk to your clients when it's a promotion for a lot of reasons. And one of them is the promotions are less effective if you've just constantly been hammering them with promotions and sales and buy stuff from me.
Hmm.
The promotions are less effective because they're just not paying attention to you as much.
Yeah, and I'm again, I think there's a piece of kind of treading lightly here. We all kind of know some retailers, and I'm just saying blankly, like not even folks that we work with, um, businesses in the retail space that we do. We see maybe just a few emails from them a year when they're announcing their some promotion, and they're typically times where other major retailers are holding promotions. It's
Mhm.
very hard to get someone's attention. Maybe some of these are businesses that I would shop at more often, but getting in front of me at three times a year when I'm not, maybe as a consumer, I'm not ready to make that type of purchase.
Yeah,
I don't, does that make sense? Like,
it does, and I think somehow, or at least maybe some people think, well, I only do it three times a year so that I'm not inundating the consumer, and so that it's special. But the
yeah.
problem is the assumption is, I guess, that oh, well, they know who I am and they remember me and they're familiar with me and they're ready to receive. And that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
Whereas if multiple times a year you reached out with interesting things or community minded pieces of content, then you'd be top of mind without being burdensome from a sales standpoint.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think we all are a little afraid. We're all a little afraid. I think
Yeah.
I've worked in a bike shop when you're asking folks for their email addresses, and we all know that there are multiple reasons. It's not just for trying to sell to them, that it's really important that you have their email address, and I think
Mhm.
that's worth communicating. But we're all so kind of afraid of
Yeah.
reaching out or maybe overstepping that relationship. But I think the variety of content is the really, really important piece. I do want to name one name. I do because I do get emails from this retailer, a couple of these retailers, and I really like their content. And some of these, I think one in particular is Angry Catfish in Minnesota.
Hmm.
Really good variety of content. Um, and it's the kind of content that they put out that makes me want to visit that shop. It's a mix of rides and races. They talk about their staff, they talk about new products, they talk about promotions, new stuff going on, new arrivals in the store. That's I think that's a really good example if someone's looking for maybe a kind of a mentor in that space that's also a bike shop. And I think another one off the top of my head, there's we could go on forever. I think of folks who do this really well. I think Wheel and Sprocket also does a really good
Yeah.
job of a lot of good content, and it's some of it. I think is a really good point too. Is like I don't live in either of these places. I live in Colorado, but again, they if I'm ever in these areas, they make me want to go out of my way to go to these businesses.
Yeah. Isn't that
Yeah,
the point?
hmm
Because bike shops are fun. They're usually
yeah,
enjoyable business. Being people will go to a bike shop when they're not really necessarily ready to buy something. It's a
hmm
fun place. It's a community centered event.
yeah.
Trying to
Love bike
recreate
shops.
that, which I think those businesses you mentioned are good at that. They recreate that experience so that you don't necessarily have to go to get an idea what's there if you did go. And I think
Hmm
that's a beautiful part of it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people maybe that aren't. Look, I think also the reality of you work in a bike shop, you own a bike shop, you manage a bike shop. You're busy. You're wearing lots of hats, and sometimes trying to figure out marketing is like a it's such a third whatever. It's way down the line of things that you need to be spending your time on. But I think if we could really simplify it, I think there's kind of a few pieces. Is you're that you have lots of customers, lots of folks who have shopped with you. They can't come into your store every week, every month and hear what's new. But if they did, what would you tell them? That's what I would put in an email, into a social post.
Exactly.
You don't have to be a graphic designer. Um, you don't have to be a marketing specialist in order just to communicate and share who you are and what you're up to.
Yeah,
Like, I think
think
that's,
about what you tell them. Like you said, think about what
yeah,
they'd experience in the store. What would you say to them? Say that.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and
Uh,
speaking of the how, I think there's a few things. So social's a good one. You mentioned that.
hmm
Don't overthink those things. If you want to overthink them, that's fine. But frequency's nice, and it's a great way just to say that. And I think there's people talk about an 80-20 or a 90-10 rule. 80% of the time, those posts should be something community minded or this bringing the experience to the consumer if the consumer is not coming to you every day. And then 10% or 20%, whatever you figure, the smaller percentage can be those promotions. And then I think they have more impact because the consumer's used to hearing from you. They will typically interact with those posts, and that helps all the algorithmic type things to show your post. And then when the promotion does come, it's not this, oh, look, I'm just here to sell something. It's another part of what's happening in the store that you want them to know about, and there's a better chance it's received well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then have we talked I think just briefly about the couple different types of emails. Maybe we should touch on that.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're using emails, there's certainly promotional type emails. You'll use Mailchimp or Constant Contact to send those
Mhm.
out, and that's a great way to share what's going on. But more and more, a lot of this communication we talk about is based around transactions, and that is something that's not that easy to do. It was impossible to do physically, like we talked about a second ago. But we have a tool that allows that to work pretty seamlessly, and so it can see what's happening in your point of sale system. You can build these campaigns ahead of time so that everybody that buys a bike gets these set of emails over time. They are directly related to that purchase, so they don't have the same restrictions and rules, and frankly, the same negative connotations sometimes that promotional emails have. So feel good about that. But you don't really have to do anything once they're set up, and so you're able to communicate with people that make these. And sometimes you do a lot of these campaigns, but at least think about the major purchases,
Hmm.
bikes, expensive trainers, etc.
Yeah.
Service. If you did a tune up
Service.
last year, you probably want to tune up this year.
Hmm.
Those things are just pretty easy to set up. They're affordable, and consumers, I think, by and large, appreciate that because it does. I mean, you want to be so thoughtful that you could pick the phone up and call everybody. You just can't. And so this is a pretty good proxy for that. And we see pretty good results. And this is one way where I'm saying we can't help you with that. We do these kind of things. But the social piece, you don't need us for that. You don't need to be a work stand anybody for that. And I
Mm-mm.
think the other thing that bike shops have always done well is the physical support.
Yeah.
Being at the community events, being at the race, sending people out, being on the bike rides. That stuff matters too. So don't sell yourself short when you've got staff that go to the weekly group ride. If you host a weekly group ride, that's a big part of building that community. It's also something else you can talk about in
Hmm.
all these other mediums. So that's all I wanted to get across today. I think you and I talk about these things a lot. It's one of the biggest tools we have, or biggest levers we pull when we're trying to help stores grow sales. Don't forget about those people that have already shown the interest in your business by doing business with you. Communicate with them in as many different ways as it can work for you, but just don't overthink it. Be
Yeah.
genuine, just like you would if they were in the store.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I just had, I think, just a few kind of like tips, I think, that can kind of wrap this up that you got me thinking about. None of which are reaching out to us. That's always an option. But I think you mentioned staff. I think a bike shop staff is probably most bike shops' biggest untapped marketing resource.
Yeah.
Whether it's, them being out in the community, them having an ideas of being like, what should we talk to our folks about? Um, they probably, chances are, maybe pay more attention to social media or email marketing than maybe you get to if you're the manager or the owner. Yeah, so really good insight for them. Let them help. Maybe they would have fun with it, or look for someone that could enjoy it. My other tip would be plan ahead, even if it's just
Mm.
a list. You'd be like, January, let's talk about this. February, let's talk about this, and so on and so on. So it makes it easier when that time comes. You're like, okay, I know we wanted to send an email about winter riding. Okay, cool, we got that down. Let's make it happen.
Yep.
Um, and then last, I would say make sure that you're subscribed to emails from brands or companies that you really like. Like maybe it's some other bike shops around the country, like I mentioned. Maybe it's major retailers like REI or Backcountry. Or one of my favorites is women's outdoor apparel company, Wild Rye. I think they do awesome emails. Yeah, just some things like that, and see what catches your eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. I like to think that somehow around the work stand is like that, where hopefully we're not just talking about direct stuff all the time. That there's just general information any store could use, whether you're one of our clients or even if you're not even a bike shop.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some good general knowledge in here. I think we sometimes know what we're talking about, Mark.
I think so.
Well,
All
we
right.
certainly care. That's one place to start.
We do. We care. We want to share. That's
Yeah.
important. Yeah. Cool.
Well, yeah. I guess yeah, reach out if you have any questions, topics you'd like us to discuss. What's our
Podcast at workstand.com.
podcast at
Or the
workstand.com?
comments below. If you're watching on YouTube, just use the comments.
We do love a good comment.
We do.
Really makes my day.
True.
Well, I guess until then, we'll see you around the workstand.